Call this meeting to order, 6 p.m. Wednesday, June 23rd, 2021. Special City of Somerton Special Council meeting. Can we please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance? Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Roll call.
Mayor Gerardo Naya.
Present.
Vice Mayor Juan Castillo.
Present.
Councilmember Miguel Villalpando. Councilmember Carlos Gonzalez. Councilmember Luis Galindo. Councilmember Jesus Roldan.
Present.
Councilmember Marta Garcia.
Present.
Okay, Mayor, you have a quorum.
Thank you. Moving on, call to the public. Anybody from the public wishing to address council? There's no one. Moving to presentations, we have one item, discussion and matters regarding the preliminary budget for fiscal year 2022. Who's going to present the budget? Great.
Oh, okay.
Vice Mayor likes the mask.
Good evening, Mayor, Vice Mayor, Council Member. I hope you are well. So this evening, I thought it would be appropriate to go over the budget worksheets that are attached to the agenda. However, I don't have control over the PDF, so I'm just going to use this Excel spreadsheet, which is exactly the same as what you received and is attached to your agenda. But I will focus, if you're okay with it, hide these other columns and make it a little bigger for you. So within this current budget, I think what I'd like for you to see right now, to focus on right now, are the revenues. Okay. So our revenues for 2021, I estimated would be for tax revenues, for our local revenues, our intergovernmental revenues would be 2,940,000 and 4,800,000 because of the situation when we were in and putting together the 2021 budget because of COVID and other factors. I thought I would be conservative in the revenues, so I didn't budget significant. I didn't expect revenues to increase significantly. However, with the Supreme Court ruling on the Wayfair case, that allowed us to receive revenues for sales tax from online stores. So that increased our revenues quite significantly. I believe it was $176,000 this year. And I estimated that we'd probably receive that amount next fiscal year as well. So our tax revenues, our sales tax revenues, and our state shared revenues increased significantly. And as of next year, based on the projections from the state, they're still scheduled to increase. So that's why you see a significant difference in our revenues for the 2020 year, the 2022 fiscal year. That's the highlight of our revenues for 2022. For expenditures, as you are aware, there was the personnel classification study done, and within this personnel number are adjustments as well as a 2% increase across the board. There are some expenditures that I wasn't able to receive current figures on. For example, fire PSTRS numbers, so they're a bit inflated just because I wasn't sure what plan certain people were in, and so I opted for the highest of the plan. Also, the medical insurance is also a bit inflated because I couldn't get those medical premium numbers. So I estimate that it's about $200,000 over because of those two factors. Our operations, though, they are back at the 2019, close to the 2019 expenditure limits in 2020, and even in 2019, no, it wasn't 2019, 2020 and 2021, the budget was cut. So we cut the budget in 2020, and we cut our budget in 2021 in light of COVID. And in light of COVID, we went through and did a 10% cut overall on our expenditures. Now, we anticipate that in 2021, based on our estimates, we'll be below that budget numbers. However, for operations, we are anticipating to go back to normal levels. So that's why you see a bigger increase within the operating numbers.
You mentioned back to normal. What was not normal the past couple of years as far as operating?
Okay. Well, with the 2020 and 2021 budgets, in 2021, we cut a significant portion of travel because of COVID. So we anticipated that we wouldn't be traveling very much, and education and training was cut as well. So the departments went ahead and budgeted for travel and education and training, as well as other expenditures that they hadn't included in 2021, specifically for that very reason, because we didn't know where COVID would have taken us. So those are some of the expenditures that went up this year. So, and in 2020, we also went ahead and cut the budget in order to accommodate the COLA. So we cut about $400,000 of the budget from 2019 to 2020, and then in 2021, we reduced again. So this is in 2022, we're including a lot of those expenditures.
A lot of what, I'm sorry?
Some of those expenditures like the travel, the training, other items that had been pushed back. So that's what's included currently. You'll also see that we have capital outlay and CIPs, which are included in a separate sheet that we can go to right now, or if you want, we can continue with the summary.
We can go to it right now.
Okay. So CIPs for this year. So when the city manager and I met to review CIPs, we received some information for the federal funds that indicated that we may be able to use some of those federal funds for several of the CIP projects we initially had listed in the general fund. So that's why you'll see a difference between what you saw in the retreat and what you're seeing now out of the general fund, because we identified some of those projects and moved them to the ARP fund, because we anticipate we'll be able to use those monies to fund some of those projects. Okay, so for the 2022 year, we have a vehicle under administration. We also have in 2021 the council chamber updates. In animal control, there is a vehicle that is scheduled to be replaced, and another in 2023. For community development, we have the zoning and subdivision code update. There are several projects in economic development that include the Avenue DE Corridor Regional Master Plan, the mailbox clusters, property acquisition, Old City Hall improvements, the downtown entrance arch, welcome signage, and a design for 223 West Main Street.
Mayor, if you will, some of the vehicles that are there, even though that has that budget amount, those are going to be financed.
That's correct. Thank you.
So it's going to be spread out through the next 4 or 5 years. So it's, although it says whatever amount on there, it'll get spread out.
Right. So the 35,000 is because we're going to capitalize that purchase, but we're going to pay over the next 4 years for the vehicles. Let's see. For fire, we have firefighter turnout gear. You'll see a sewer line replacement or repair in the public safety facility, and that's been split between fire and police, as well as a new chassis for an ambulance. This again will be split over 4 or 5 years. It's we're budgeting the full amount for the purchase, but we're gonna go ahead and finance that purchase. Cardiac monitors and apparatus space swamp coolers. For the police department, we have 3 vehicles, 3 trucks, and the half the portion of the sewer line. For Parks and Recreation, we have the skate park, the phase 2 lighting project for Centennial Park, senior center exercise equipment, the underground APS power lines at Centennial Park, and parks equipment. I believe some of that parks equipment was purchased this year, as well as the Joe Munoz basketball repair. These are the capital projects that are listed in the summary page that we were going over.
The community center expansion, where is it?
It's on the ARP monies.
Okay.
It's in a different spreadsheet. I do want to mention one item or 2 items, as a matter of fact. The turnout gear, it's on there, but depending on what the grant, if we receive money, grant from where Louis actually did, that'll get reduced by $80,000. I think it was 83,000 you applied for, correct? And then the senior center exercise equipment, we might be only up to 12,000 because even though we applied for the grant, unfortunately, the grant is requesting 65% for us to pay for. So we might end up just doing what we were going to do from the very beginning.
Okay. So I'll switch over to the ARP projects. So the ARP projects for 2022, I mean, we included any projects that we felt may have fit the definition within what we received from the feds. So the rewiring and network system project, the ERP system actually would fall into that category as well. The PBX phone system, security system for City Hall, and I believe that includes, oh no, there's cameras for the impound lot as well.
For those, I believe, we did across the city for
Across
security and safety purposes for especially during the pandemic.
Okay. Fiber optic infrastructure to city facilities, the HVAC for the community center, and right-of-way and expansion of the community center. And a court security system, I believe the judge is applying for a grant for this, so depending on whether he receives it or not, that might come from different funds. We also have the bay garage for public safety, for the public safety facility, tank 3 for water, and the GIS equipment replacement. Do you have any questions on those?
Any questions or comments?
So I also, after discussing it with the city manager, I thought it would be a good idea to create a fund for the infrastructure and property sale so that we can track it separately for when we sell the property over at Parkview and utilize those funds to to execute the infrastructure projects. So that way we can account for that separately. So that's been budgeted in this Parkview Commerce Fund. And that's where the expenditures will be posted to and the revenue will be accounted for. Which is why you see a significant decrease in the actual CIP projects within the general fund itself. My thoughts on how to handle the federal funds are as projects are start being executed, then they'll hit that particular fund and we'll be able to track them easier rather than having them in the general fund and having those funds commingled. Any other questions? So I'll go back to the general fund summary. So this is the combination of CIP and capital outlay, which is just equipment versus actual capital improvements. So they're broken out into 2 separate accounts. Our debt service, which does include the financing for the ambulance and the new vehicles. Transfers out, there is an additional transfer last year. There's a transfer for the senior center and a transfer for the water development fees. So I just wanted to bring that to your attention. And then finally, we have our contingency. Here, I wanted to separate the as the transfers in the monies that we received for AZ Cares and what I believe we may be able to utilize from federal funds for premium wages that can be transferred from that fund where those federal funds will be housed into the general fund. And then we have the financing of the ambulance and the vehicles coming in. So right now with the budget for the general fund, there's a deficit of 2.3, almost $2.4 million. Would you like me to go through each of the departments?
Yeah, okay.
Great. So for our mayor and council fund, we did meet earlier in the year and we included those expenditures that were discussed. And so obviously your personnel doesn't change, but the operating has changed. It did increase a little. based on those, the meeting that we had. I believe it includes, obviously the Tamal Festival, the Corn Festival, and funding for other intergovernmental agencies such as YSIPTA and Forefront, etc. And here is the transfer to the water impact fees. I'm not sure that this is the full amount that we're going to utilize, but I wanted to have some money in there in case we did need to transfer that over. And our debt service, which includes the city hall, land, etc. For a total of 1.2 million. In administration, we actually opted to put special events under administration just because it had been kind of going back and forth. So within administration, you'll find the obviously city manager and the special events coordinator salary and expenditures in there, which is why you see a fluctuation, a significant increase, is because where before there was only one and a half person, because the city clerk also assists the city manager. So a portion of her salary also is included in there. Capital outlay, which is the vehicle, and debt service for the vehicle. So the $55,000 aren't going to go out. It's going to be the $10,000, but for financial statement purposes, I have to show the entire $55,000.
I have a question. Karen.
Sure.
So for, under administration, under operating, I see that for 2021 it was 211, and for 2022 it went up 120. Can you elaborate on that?
Yes. So in the last fiscal year, special events, the entire budget for special events resided in Parks and Recreation. So because the entire budget for special events went over to administration, that's why you see that operational increase, that significant increase. There's also travel. There's also, is there another special? Oh, yes, the employee appreciation dinner, which we didn't budget for last year, that we budgeted for this year. That's up to you all whether that's going to happen or not. But I wanted to ensure that there was sufficient budget authority in there if you decided to go forward with that. So, yes. Right, right. So because in 2021, the special events, the full budget for special events was in Parks and Recreation. And in 2020, the full budget for special events was in Economic Development.
So it followed the staff member.
Exactly. It did follow the staff member. So that way it resides all in one place. Does that answer your question? And you'll also see something similar, well, not similar to that, but in the city clerks, you'll see in 2022, the operating budget is significantly less. The reason for that is because in 2021, we actually had the elections. And so elections are funded through the city clerk budget. So in 2022, there's no election, but in 2023, we anticipate having an election at the end of 2022, which is the 2023 fiscal year. So you'll see across the board for the city clerk, you'll see 1 year on and 1 year off for those election costs. For police, obviously there is the same increase in personnel. In operations, I believe there was a couple of items that are included in here that weren't budgeted for in 2021 or 2020. I can't think of them off the top of my head right now, but there was an increase in the YRCS radios, and we saw an increase in, I apologize, it'll come to me. Right here in capital outlay, though, you see the vehicle purchase along with the $17,000 in the capital improvement at the public safety facility, which is the same for fire. For debt service, I've included the ambulance chassis as well in there. So these are the significant costs. Personnel and fire, this is going to be where a big adjustment of that personnel study is. I believe it's over half. It's $110,000 of the 260. So $130,000 of the 160 of 260. So it's a significant increase here. In operations, we have, I think utility was a big one, as well as in the operations for police and fire, as well as some purchases. I think it included some defibrillators, and in the police department, it actually included tasers, because the tasers are no good after a certain amount of years, and those have to be replaced. And for fire, it was defibrillators, right, Chief? The defibrillators are included in your budget this year?
Yeah,
Yes.
those are part of the CAP as well as the chassis.
So again, the debt service payment for the ambulance is also included in the debt. So if it wasn't for that other ambulance or for the vehicles and police, the debt service would have decreased significantly, because we just finished paying off 3 other vehicles and police and 1 ambulance and fire. So that would have had an impact as well. Within the court, we have an additional personnel. The security officer, the court security officer, and the adjustments to from the personnel study. In Parks and Recreation, we have the adjustment for the parks for the personnel study. In operations, there were a couple of items that he included in there, as well as additional special events expenditures, and special event expenditures and additional contract labor. The capital outlay and CIP, both of those amounts we just went over here in the CIP list. And the transfer, this transfer is for the senior center, where we don't usually use the full extent of the transfer, but that senior center must balance out. So whatever isn't used, we don't transfer it over. So for 2021, we don't anticipate we're going to transfer the full 110, it'll be 102. For facilities maintenance, we have the 1 person, and the increase here is actually an increase in APS, billings. Community development, the same. In operations for community development, I believe this included the planning and zoning, not planning and zoning, the general plan, the zoning code update. And there was additional professional services that we included, correct, Carmen? For, yeah. In finance, obviously the same personnel adjustments, and it actually decreased as a result. I'm not budgeting the full amount of the financial advisor. So last year we had budgeted a significant amount for the financial advisor for in case we had a bond over here for in the Parkview side of town, and we didn't, so that decreased. Animal control. This actually has the increase is as a result of the additional APS costs that had not been allocated originally to animal control for the area that they have out in by, where is it? The animal shelter, correct. As well as the vehicle purchase. Yes. And the radios, actually, yes. Carmen indicated that they needed to purchase new radios, and that will be an adjustment that's going to go from contingency to animal control because they require the purchase of new radios. And that was actually something I missed. In economic development, I believe there are additional funds there for agreements for, again, the Parkview Commerce area. Correct, Hector? Yes, for, and professional services for any engineering that might be required. In IT, I believe those expenditures have decreased. I think it was as a result of the server project ending here in 2021 that will not be required in 2022. Human resources, the same, that increased a little, but that's the majority due to travel and training. Okay.
For the personnel portion of it, is this only one person in HR?
Yes.
The manager's not, because I know there's two functions. There's no.
That didn't, actually, we didn't do the transfer this year because it wasn't indicated whether that restructuring was going to be permanent.
And I know that we had made some moves within payroll to HR. Is that allocated, or where is
No.
payroll at?
That payroll is still under finance, but I haven't moved it over because I wasn't sure whether that was going to continue.
But there was a move, wasn't there? Or, as far as I know.
Administratively, it was. But the finance portion, the budget portion of it's still under finance.
That's correct. And this, my impression was that that position under my director was moved over to HR, just like the special events coordinator was moved into admin and that money followed. So it makes sense to have that money follow the position where it's at.
Like I said, I didn't know whether that was going to be a permanent change.
Okay.
So that's why that didn't occur.
Yeah, I actually had that same question because I saw that special events was moved to administration, and I was just gonna, ask as to what the difference was.
No, well,
So
I can answer some of those questions. In terms of what was going to happen, we were looking at obviously bringing in HR director or HR manager. That's where we were thinking of how things were going to reshuffle people around, if it's going to stay in payroll or if it's going to go back to HR. So that's what we were, at least for myself, thinking that if we would hire an HR director or manager, then come back to finance as far as administrative is concerned. But it all depends on where we land at the end of the budget process. When everything gets approved, and things might change here within the next week or so. But yes, you're correct. The person will follow the budget will follow the person, whoever who's.
I'd say just to have that consistency, we do it for one, just, just kind of, that way we're not kind of like, the perception doesn't seem like we're picking and choosing, so.
Budget wise, it doesn't matter, but administratively, I think if we follow processes, we gotta be across the board. We cannot be picking and choosing who we not. If the process was followed, then let's show it. I think there's more to it than just the budget, and maybe that's a conversation that we can have later.
Yes, correct. Because remember that change did occur after the budget process in September or August, whenever that did occur. So the budget portion of it stayed as is. It's the future, obviously, for next year, what we're gonna do, correct?
Yeah, but just the picking and choosing and not being following the same procedures for everyone. But budget wise, shouldn't affect what we're doing today.
For the, I believe that was the same for the city attorney, just training and education and travel. I think those were the only items that increased in that budget. And we have our contingency.
There's a part-time administrative specialist also assigned to that department that gets shared with HR. Under personnel.
And that is it for the general fund. I did want to bring to your attention, Mayor, I think we went over the, when we met about what you indicated that in 2019, when I came in, it was very doom and gloom. And the reason for that was this cash within the general fund. This was our cash balance at the end of 2019 and the cash balance at the end of 2020, which is significantly low. So this is why within the general fund, it was I was very diligent about cutting because of the lack of cash flow. But the AZ Cares has helped with regards to the cash flow. So I wanted you to make sure.
And without the AZ Cares, do we have our revenues matching our expenditures, or
no,
at least are we in the deficit?
We would have been at a deficit, yes. And we would still be at a deficit without that.
So we adopt the budget today, we would be in deficit without the AZ Cares money?
Yes, definitely that for 2021, because if you look at, for 2022, if you look at the deficit in 2022, it's 2,390,000. That's a significant deficit, a lot more than I feel comfortable with.
Okay.
So that includes the CIPs and the contingency. So if you add the contingency and some of that capital outlay and CIPs, that comes out to almost $2 million, $1,995,000. So yeah, we would be still at a deficit even without the contingency.
If we remove the CIPs, will we still have a deficit? Because CIPs are mostly one-time things, but they're not extended for. Yes, we would still be at a deficit, but it wouldn't be as significant, and the majority of the deficit would be made up of our contingency. Any questions, comments? I'll move forward with the governmental funds if you're okay with it. Yes, go ahead. Okay. So governmental funds, the major governmental funds obviously includes HERF. HERF is, and if you're okay with it, I'll just minimize these columns or hide these columns so we can focus on the prior year, on the current year and the year. So
this is our 2022 budget. So, and according to what information we received from the state, we can anticipate $1,411,000 in gas tax revenue. Last year, I budgeted 1,457,000, but we actually received 1,475,000. So an additional almost $20,000 more. I anticipate that this number will be a little more. And so those are the only revenues that really make up the HERF.
You said a little more, right?
Yeah, I think so. Oh, I'm sorry. That and interest, those are the only two revenue sources for HERF. In the past, we've received monies from refunds of projects that we participated in that ADOT sends us monies for. That's why you see an additional amount in miscellaneous revenues for 2019 and 2020. In operations, there was not a significant increase, in fact, a decrease in the pavement preservation program, because in the last couple of years, we had been increasing that amount. We went from 200,000 to 300,000 in 2020 and 2021. So we went back to normal levels in 2022. As we have a significant amount of projects in the CIP for HERF. We have capital outlay, which the vehicle, the street sweeper that was on back order, rolled over into this fiscal year, and that will be financed. So included in this capital outlay is the financing of the street sweeper. And in the CIPs, would you like me to go through the CIPs for HERF?
We're fine, well, unless somebody else wants.
No? Okay. So we have 143,000 in contingency for the HERF fund, 10% of the total revenues. And transfers in is the financing, and transfers out is debt service. And we will be at a deficit here in 2022. However, our cash balance is double that. So I feel comfortable having that deficit in 2022. However, if we do utilize all our revenues, we will have to come back in 2023 and potentially cut here in these years. And if the revenues don't come in addition to what we've anticipated. This is, if you don't have any questions on HERF, I'll move over to the next fund, which is going to be significant. These are the federal funds, Arp funds, in essence, where we have the, we anticipate getting 2.5 and utilizing that revenue to execute the CIP projects that we went over. And there are transfers in for premium pay into general fund. So at the end of 2024, there'll still be, we haven't budgeted for the full amount. There'll be 790,000 left over if we don't utilize it. And again, these numbers are, the CIP numbers are coming from this Arp spreadsheet. The 992.9 $6,000 and $50,000. I did include a contingency amounts and the transfers. Do you have any questions on that? For our Parkview Commerce, again, for property sales, we're not sure exactly how much we'll receive in 2020, but I budgeted $1 million there and $1 million in expenditures for the infrastructure and any land. I'm sorry, right here, and $150 in any land preparation fees, just in case we require those funds. And that'll be contingent upon the monies coming in. Here in the senior center, we have our normal grants. I anticipate we'll receive the same amount of funding, if not continue to receive additional funding from WACOG for COVID as well. I included charges because since the senior center had been closed for the last 2 years, for the last year or so, we hadn't received that revenue stream. Sometimes we get some payment on meals and then miscellaneous to include any fundraisers. Again, this 2020 in the operations is to account for any additional funds that we may receive from WACOG and some contingency. So that fund balances itself out through the general fund. Here's 110 that we transfer out of the general fund and into the senior center. Any questions?
Questions?
I will move on to the utility funds. Okay, so let me highlight the 2022. And make it bigger because I can't see it. Can't imagine you. So water sales, that's where we start. There is a scheduled increase in 2022. I anticipate that we'll see a significant increase as a result. Our consumption was up this year, so which is why our fees was a lot more than I had thought we would be receiving. So about $50,000 more than I anticipated our revenues would be. And that consumption, along with the increase and the rate increase, I think will get us to a good amount of revenue. Last year, we did not have shutoffs, so shutoff revenues I'm anticipating will increase in 2022, and other miscellaneous revenues that we receive, which includes interest. So I'm anticipating 1.8 million in revenues and expenditures. Again, the personnel adjustments and operations. In operations, I believe the increase here was chemicals. I believe chemicals increased. In addition to the training and those other items within that increase. I believe utilities also increased within the operations. We have capital outlay, which it includes a vehicle. And in our CIP, we have the water projects that we are having financed through WIFA, which include the water tank, the second water tank, and the water line in the area of Parkview for the high school. So that is the majority of why we're at a deficit here in the water utility fund. However, it's as a result of those projects that have to be completed. Within our debt service, that includes the additional, the vehicle and the additional loans from WIFA and our contingency. Even with a bit of a deficit within this fund, I anticipate that by 2024, we'll be in much better shape. We'll be breaking even, which is great because of the condition that the fund was in before was really quite bad. Do you have any questions on the water fund? No. I will move over to the wastewater fund. And also part of the reason why the water fund was in such good shape is because it had to loan money to the wastewater fund to cover the restrictions in the debt covenants for the loans.
As it would go from like the 1 million to the 200,000.
Yes, that's why.
I wanted to see that across the board.
Yeah. Oh, if only. Okay, so in our wastewater fund, again, there will be one more increase to the wastewater fund, rate increase. Fortunately, with the rate increases we've done, we're a little bit more aggressive. Well, not aggressive, just a little higher. And there was only a need to increase them for 3 years. So this will be the last year, I believe, of those increases in the wastewater fund. Let's see, connection fees are still budgeted for consistently. And miscellaneous includes interest. So there was an adjustment done here in personnel, but it wasn't as significant because I believe we didn't include those the benchmarks for the operators because right now you're in the process of revamping those, correct? And for the operations, the majority increase was in chemicals again. That was the main increase in the wastewater fund. Sure.
Now looking at this, with what we're bringing in the water revenue, is it suffice to cover our maintenance and operation? Or are we still in the negative there?
I believe because of the increases for the last 3-4 years, we're still at a bit of a deficit, but once we get through, I think by next year, we'll be at a break-even point. The reason is the rates hadn't covered for so long that we're catching up.
So it's taking us, what is it?
3 years?
2-3 years since we made that motion to break even.
Yes.
Wow.
Yes. And that's just because the revenue spike wasn't there. We didn't want to increase those.
We had it increased it in over 10 years, right?
Yes. And so it's going to take a little while, unfortunately. So with wastewater, though, there is the big project there that is that we are receiving loan proceeds from WIFA, as well as we have the sewer, the the lift station and the force main. And do we have any vehicle purchases? Not out of wastewater, right? Okay. And our debt service, like I said, if you look at the wastewater debt service compared to the water debt service, there's a significant difference. We're at 351 in water, 351,000 a year versus 830,000 a year. So that debt that we carry, I believe in 2024, one of those loans will help because we will have finished paying it off in 2023. So that'll allow us to, that'll help with breaking even in this fund. And we have a $200,000 contingency. Do you have any questions on the wastewater? And now we have sanitation. So let's see. So our revenues, we estimate that we're going to be about $30,000 over this year of our revenues that we had budgeted in 2021. And we anticipate we'll be at about 900,000 in 2022. We did have a significant sale of the recycle. I believe Sam did present before you the recycle program, and that appears to be doing very well. So that's bringing in a couple $1,000 more. For personnel, the same adjustment here. And in operations, there was not a significant increase. I believe utilities was the only one, and contract labor. So it's very consistent with every other department. And we also have the purchase of a dump truck, refuse truck. The refuse truck will be financed. So you see the loan proceeds here. And I think it's $25,000 in repairs to the current. Is that correct, Sam? And debt service, we just finished paying off this other refuse truck. And we have $80,000 in contingency. So this year, it looks like we're breaking even. And next year, we'll be at a bit of a deficit if we spend all the funds, including contingency, which is unlikely. So I feel rather comfortable with all the utility funds. And that's really as a result of the loans that were, the financing for the major projects that we're doing, which is why I feel comfortable moving forward with those projects. And I feel comfortable with the cash flow that they'll be producing. Do you have any other questions for me? Okay. That's all I have. Unless you have questions.
Any questions, comments? Thank you. Moving on to new business, discussion and possible action to adopt the tentative budget for fiscal year 2022.
Mayor, if you will, please. I think it would be best to do 6.2 first, since that impacts the budget line item.
Okay. Discussion and possible action to approve a new classification and salary plan for all positions within the city service for fiscal year 2022.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. Jorge Lozano, Chief Operations Officer, also City Attorney. The proposal today is what we think is after a couple of weeks and after consulting a private firm, a consulting firm, So the City of Somerton, the HR department, along with admin, has retained public sector personnel consultants in creating and implementing a classification and salary plan. We do require a plan per our personnel policy handbook, and every year it should be presented to council and it should be approved as we believe as part of the budgetary process. We've failed to keep up with that directive. Currently, what we're using is 80% of a compensation and classification for similar positions within the city of Yuma as our benchmark for positions here in the city. And so after public sector put together their surveys, went out and surveyed some of the cities such as Nogales and was it Douglas, city of Yuma, city of San Luis, and some other, the Somerton School District, they came together with the compensation plan and a salary schedule. We've had several meetings and some other ideas generated also by council and some of the committee that we put together. So briefly, staff consisted of the city manager, our finance director, the city attorney, human resources specialist, and the payroll benefits coordinator. We've had several meetings, and the city magistrate as well. I didn't mention him. We've had several meetings in order to arrive at a sustainable and equitable plan. Even after we've met also with the mayor and another council member with our proposal. So at this point, what we're proposing is a market adjustment for only 76 out of our 130 full-time positions. That's less than 44% of our current workforce. Right now, a market adjustment is not being proposed for current department heads. And our emphasis was placed on market adjustments for hard to retain and recruit positions, as well as high turnover positions, as Mayor had directed in the past. Some of the positions that have had some turnover within the last 12 months are obviously within our public safety. We have our dispatchers at the police station, our firefighters and EMTs, paramedics. Down at Public Works, our mechanics, some of our maintenance worker ones, our wastewater operators, and treatment plant operators. And here in our administration, our information technology help desk. So one is we're proposing, if you see up on the screen, we are proposing that the council adopt and implement the salary schedule, which is up on your screen. This doesn't have a position attached to it. So it's simply the schedule that we'd be using going forward. So we start at salary range 1 and it goes all the way to 75. So this at a glance does not financially impact us in any way, because this is just a chart that we're going to implement. We're hoping that you implement to show what our salary ranges are once we designate a number of that position. So if you see, first position starts at minimum wage, which is $12.15 an hour. And as I stated, it goes all the way to range 75. Obviously, we don't have any positions in range 75, but it's just good to have the spread so that everybody knows going forward where they can fall. So if you don't have any problems or objections, I think the salary this salary schedule is simple. It's nice to follow, and there's a 2.5% difference between ranges. The proposal would also be that all new positions that are hired going forward would be hired at the initial range, and then we'll work out here inside our administrative building on what the policies would be to move people within that range or up to midpoint and whatever. But for now, it's at the starting salary. You guys have any questions on the proposed salary schedule?
I do. I have a question. So let's say, for example, someone comes in and under this salary schedule, we wouldn't take into consideration experience?
Currently, we have a method whereby we do assign experience points. We were thinking as an internal policy, and obviously we haven't worked on that, but the internal policy would be something like up to 8 years of experience, we would credit you, or that's something between, admin and HR that we and our finance director to get together and figure out what that internal policy is going to be.
I'm just kind of thinking, if we want to do it to retain and, attract, I think that would be a crucial piece.
Yes, that's helpful, and obviously we're also bound by our budget, so this is also going to help our finance director budget appropriately for those positions going forward, where we know that the assigned range, and she could go in and maybe budget up to midpoint for some years or for some positions as we deem necessary. And then the second part of this presentation involves, if you can scroll down in there, the actual positions that we have here within the city of the city of Somerton. So once we adopt a salary schedule, this is the proposed salary grade that would be assigned to each position. Now, purposely, we don't have the name of the individual there because I think it's a little unfair to make decisions based on who's in that role. But for now, if you can see in front of you, we've taken in consideration the 2% a 2% COLA that is being proposed with the tentative budget that Ms. Gallegos just presented.
Well, it's in the budget. I'll mention it right now.
It's in a tentative budget, but if the tentative budget does go forward this evening, I believe there's a 2% cost of living adjustment across the board for all the positions within the city.
Let me clarify that. It's based on what if the salary schedule is approved. What we did was whoever is higher getting to the minimum point. If it's 2% and or the base rate, they would get the highest of either or. So not everyone's going to get 2%, but several of the positions will get a increase based on that base.
So assuming the council approves a 2% across the board for all employees, that leaves 54 employees that would be adjusted according to our market study, and what we're proposing is the new salary grade. And as I mentioned earlier, the emphasis is on our firefighters and paramedics, our dispatchers, and the various public works positions that you've seen that have the high turnover.
It's about 300,000.
And so overall, the proposed impact, if this proposed salary market adjustment is adopted this evening, is approximately $300,000, and that's inclusive of retirement benefits and all the other costs associated with personnel costs.
Is 300,000 just to the general fund or overall?
Also to mention, this schedule is based on 2080. So basically fire department, their schedule is different than the 2080. It's what is it, Chief? 2,960. So based on that, even though they might say pay grade 20 or 23 or whatever it is, it'll be based on that amount of hours.
Questions or comments?
And I'm assuming that this is sustainable for next year and the following years.
Serena, can you please approach the podium?
currently in the general fund, we're at a deficit, and that's attributable to capital outlay, capital improvements, and a contingency. So if we continue with the scheduled, yes, no, it will not be sustainable.
But when we had our meeting, I specifically asked if it was, and you felt comfortable with it.
Yes, with just the personnel portion of it, with the additional sales tax, but there's also the capital projects to take into account. If we add those capital projects into the mix, then it won't be sustainable. The capital projects list hadn't been finalized, so right now, the way that it sits, I don't feel comfortable with the list of CIPs in addition to this adjustment.
So I guess we go back to the drawing board and we can approve the tentative budget, but I would like to take a closer look on it before we make a decision. At least that's my thoughts now.
I second you on that, Mayor, because I do feel like, I mean, if you don't feel, if our finance director doesn't feel confident in that it's sustainable, I kind of feel like if we move forward with it, we'd be kind of shooting ourselves on the foot.
So we approve the tentative budget today, and then we can revisit this.
The salary schedule?
Yes, and every overall the CIPs and salary schedule.
The salary schedule in itself is sustainable.
Yes.
It's just the CIP.
The CIPs that she's concerned about, but as far as the salary is concerned, I think that's what.
Yeah, but we got to look at everything.
The spreadsheet that we went over has everything. It has the personnel, it has the operations, it has the CIPs. There's all that information is in there.
Yeah, but after our last meeting, you felt that it was sustainable. Now it changed.
That's why
I would like to have a meeting and we can discuss it.
Currently the way that the CIPs are, there's a significant amount going out in CIPs, and before that list wasn't finalized.
It was prior to our meeting that we had not finalized, but we had discussed it. We brought it in a previous meeting. So, and as for it hasn't changed as far as what we're going to do. So at least coming into this meeting, I thought that everything was ironed out, but now we get more information and you're making us decide between salaries and projects. And I feel that we're at a rock and a hard place. So I feel just we can pass the tentative budget, but I just don't like how it plays out. That now it's a capital improvement, or when we had met, and at least the impression was that it was mostly a done deal.
So a lot of some of the projects moved over to the Arp funds because we received more information with regards to what would be applicable for those funds and which projects we would be able to utilize. Like I said, right now we're at a, I don't know, 2 point, if you can go back, Andrea, to the spreadsheet, and that's a significant deficit. So right now, general fund, there you go. So if you look at the area in blue, there's about 1.2 million in capital outlay and CIP. Like I said, when we met, I didn't have the final list of CIPs. So that's why, with regards to the salary portion of it, I felt comfortable with that either market adjustment or 2% COLA.
The CIP hasn't changed in a month since we last met, at least what was being presented.
So the CIP list is included, I think it's page 4.
Yes, and like I said, that's what was presented in our last meeting. Nothing has changed. So at least for me, I would like to have more
The other thing is that, remember that the personnel expenditures, since we don't have all the numbers as far as the premiums, that also it's on the salary, it's on the spreadsheet, it's maxed out, because until we get all the full information in terms of the health benefits and the PSPRS, then that'll end up dropping.
So, yeah, these are the list of CIPs and,
I feel we're going back and forth, and
okay.
at least,
I agree. I think we need to have that information, in concrete for sure, and I mean, maybe if we wait until we have those finishing numbers, we can go back and do something retroactive or something like that. But once we have those official numbers, at least for me, that's my take.
yeah, and we just need to approve by state statute the tentative budget. And hopefully we can work this out before the fiscal year and have a decision on CIPs and the classification study.
But I have a question, Mayor. So does the tentative budget that's proposed, does that include already this market adjustment and
it does,
and
right?
the 2%? It's
It
already
does.
included.
It does. So the tentative budget can be approved, but it cannot be increased.
The adjustment for the salaries, once we get premiums and potentially all the PSPRS and information, it'll be about $200,000, $200,000 to $300,000. And if you look at the bottom line, we're at a deficit of 2.39. So it's going to make a slight difference, but it's not going to make a significant difference. I don't feel like it would be sustainable, no. In order for it to be sustainable, I think we would have to reduce the budget by $500,000, give or take.
We would ask for a motion to table the item.
Make a motion to table the item.
I second it. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Item number one, discussion of possible action to adopt a tentative budget for fiscal year 2022. Is there a motion to adopt a tentative budget for fiscal year 2022?
Just adopting and
You still can make changes.
Yeah, you can't increase it, but you can.
make a motion to tentatively adopt the current budget fiscal 2022 as presented.
Second, this includes everything right now, right?
Correct.
Yes.
Okay.
There's a motion by Vice Mayor Castillo, second by Councilwoman Garcia. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Okay, it's 7:18. Meeting's adjourned.